Hello and welcome to The Healing Way. My name is Richard Clark, and on this video I will be discussing taking further the ideas of developing perception as I was talking about on the last video. This video will be developing perception part 3, and I was saying about the mind, difference between perceiving with the mind and seeing with the brain, or through the eyes or the senses with the brain. Now the two are very, very different. When the brain sees, or perceives I should say, when it perceives, it's a living energy. It's very dynamic, very fluid, very natural energy. And this energy, when it perceives, what it sees is living. It's like sees like. So the living energy of the mind sees the living energy in people or other life, animals, trees, whatever. It's life sees life. Now the brain, the energy of the brain is much more static. It's stored as memory and knowledge, and it's, as I say, it's more static. I wouldn't go as far as to say it's dead, but being static, it's fairly lifeless. It cannot join or connect in the same way that the living mind can perceive. Right. So when the mind perceives, there is this connection, a joining. There is a joining, and in that joining there is just unity. There is one flow. There is the insight that comes from the joining comes from the fact that the mind is actually connected to what it's perceiving. So there is a backward flow. It's important to see that. When the brain looks and sees, it sees as an observer. There is no connection, there is a gap, a space between the brain which looks and what's being looked at. There is a space. And from that, in that space, over that distance, the brain then tries to interpret and judge and value what it's looking at. So there's a completely different process. The mind joins and connects with what it's seeing, living things, connecting to living things, and in that connecting there's an information flow, an understanding, an insight into what is being looked at. When you are in this state of perceiving with the mind, there is very little feeling of personal self. You do not feel it's me doing it. It is just an action. There isn't somebody who's there doing this thing. There is just the mind perceiving. On the other hand, when you are looking with your brain, which is what you do all the time, probably most of the time, it's what most people do, there's a constant process of storing what's being seen as knowledge, as information. And to do that there is a process of labelling, comparing and recognition. So there's a good rule of thumb there that if you're thinking, I mean, even if you wonder if you're perceiving, you're probably not, because that's the mind thinking. As I said earlier, I cannot have both. I cannot think and perceive at the same time. I perceive and the perceptions flow into thoughts later. But if you are wondering, am I perceiving, then you probably aren't. And if you recognise what you're perceiving, you definitely aren't. You're still in what I think of as the thinking mode or the brain mode. Don't get stressed about this. This isn't something to fret about. It happens. It's very hard when you've spent all your life, your brain has worked in a certain way, and then someone comes along and says, try this. You won't get it straight away. And if you think back, going from being born to the point where you could independently think and work things out for yourself took maybe, I don't know, 10, 15 years. So it takes time. It shouldn't take that long. You know, as an adult you can adapt and change fairly quickly, fairly easily. It's a different mode, and in this mode you enter the world of energy. When your mind is perceiving, you enter the world of energy and you can explore that world without labelling it. You just observe it, you perceive it. And you can stay in that world for as long as you like. There are no rules. You don't have to even come back. You can stay in a perceptive mode with your mind for as long as you feel like it. Or you can just dismiss the whole thing and just stay as you are in the physical realm, in the realm of the brain and thought and memory. I try and balance the two. I think both are, I don't know if it's essential, but they're important. If you want to live in the world, act in the world, you need the worldly part of your life, which is the brain and the thinking. If you want to understand the energy side of life, and there's a lot to the energy side of life. I mean, all our thoughts are energy. There might be chemical energy, but it's still energy. All our feelings. And we perceive, I mean, you might be sitting there thinking, this is so hard, how am I going to do this? Well, you're perceiving things all the time, how you feel, how you think, what you're thinking. You know, this is an extension of this perception to get out there, to get the mind to see more, perceive more. Once you get started, it's fairly, I wouldn't say it's simple, but it does tend to steamroller. It does tend to build up momentum. And it's good to have a motivation. The thing with healing is you sit there and you look at people and you can think, I can either get a move on here and do some good and make my brain work or make my mind work, or I can just give up. And when you see people suffering and all the rest of it, then it's a good motivation, it's a good kick. It's a good kick up the rear to actually get something going. Right, that brings us to the next thing. The next, I don't know if it's a problem, but if you recognise what you're perceiving, you're in the realm of the brain, you're in the brain mode. So you're not actually perceiving anything, your mind is acting from memory. It's pushing out a memory and saying, that is perception, I'm perceiving that, and then you recognise what it is. So that whole process, no, that isn't perception, that is still in the brain world of the brain. So you perceive something, and then it becomes very interesting because it's then a case of just watching, just taking in, soaking up the perceptions, just to absorb it all. And it's all energies, and energy comes in many different shapes and forms. Sometimes it looks like the fumes that come out of car exhausts. Sometimes it looks like very compact, dense energy that's radiating very hard type particles of energy. Other times it looks like congestion. But whatever it is, when you see it, if you can see it in somebody, it nearly always means it shouldn't be there. It's energy or congestion from the physical, from the world. The world has got into people as energy. So this energy has a very heavy physical aspect to it. So it's easily to see. It's more easy to see than if it was more a very finer energy, more, I wouldn't say abstract, but I wouldn't like to say higher either. These words are very worldly words. They don't really apply to the world of energy. This is something else with the energy world. There are no markers. There isn't any up or down or good or bad or right or wrong. It just is. It's just like looking at the sun. Well, you shouldn't look at the sun because it hurt your eyes, but it's like looking at a light source and all you see is a light source. It's not a good light source or a bad light source. Whatever it is, it just is what it is. And this is something our minds have a great deal of problem with, to leave something alone, to see it for what it is and to let it be what it is. Now if you can do that over a period of time, it might take weeks, it will come to you. This is how our minds work. It's very hard for us to leave it alone, but the mind has to work independently of us. It has to be free to work and to develop and to use its own abilities to see what it wants to see. And after a few weeks, probably a few weeks, results will start to feed through and you'll start to get it. You'll remember and you think, oh yeah, I get it now, I see what that was. It might be a few weeks later, oh yeah, that I can understand that. That was that. So my advice is just to perceive and leave it alone, and then see what comes through from that perception. Because as I say, it's a natural process for the mind to feed into what it's seen, what it understands, to feed it into the brain to act upon. The mind is I was going to say mother. It's got a very female type approach to it. It tends to be an observer, a passive observer. Then the results of the observation go through to the brain, which tends to be father, a more male thing. It acts, it goes out and does things. This isn't to say women don't act, and I don't like to generalise usually, but that's the kind of feel to it. That's the kind of feeling it has. Okay, so you then get into the position where you start to understand as opposed to recognise what it is you've been perceiving, and there is an awful lot of it. I try to stay within the energy world so that it doesn't just become too much. You can fill up your mind or your memory or whatever part of you that's working. You can just overload it and you end up then not knowing what's what or anything at all. You'll see, I mean, I'm pumping out videos and blogs and I intend to keep doing this for some time, and you'll start to see how much there is out there that can be acquired and accumulated. But it isn't knowledge for its own sake. Knowledge is the brain. This is understanding. Understanding is the mind. And if you, as I say, if you stay in the world of energy, you'll find it's a very reflective world, a very deep. It can be many things: deep, passionate, compassionate, joyful, loving, sensual. There's a lot there to experience, the world of the mind. And as hopefully the healing methods start to work through, more and more of your existence, if you've been using the healing methods, more and more of your existence will start to wake up and start to join in with this. So life is not just mind, it's a lot of things. Okay, so what I was saying in the last video about joining with somebody and then making contact and then slowly letting go of the contact, but staying in that frame of mind. That's what we say these things and we don't even know what we're saying. A frame of mind. What does that mean? I call it a mode of mind. It's the mindset, the way the mind is. And if you can stay in that mind frame, in that mode, the perceptions will keep coming. The perceptions will keep coming. And when you've joined with somebody or something, it will reveal itself. That's when you start to have the insights and the realizations. As the information flows in through the connection, you have to be connected, which means no distance, no feeling of distance between you and what you're looking at, what you're perceiving. As the information flows in, that's when you start having the realizations, the insights, and then from that comes the understanding. And as I said on the last video, if you possibly can, don't resist it. Keep your mind flexible and relaxed, and your body flexible and relaxed. Any tension anywhere in your mind or your body will just block all this flow. It's all about flow. It's all about flow. It's like water. It just flows. But in the glass, it doesn't flow anywhere. And they're the barriers. So try to let it happen. Now, one of the things I used to do when I was first getting into this to develop more was, we live in the age of video and photography, obviously, television, films, and it's interesting from an outsider's point of view, probably not from the person themselves, but say a person in their 60s who's famous, who's always been the public eye, who's been filmed and videoed all their life, they die. Maybe they die of cancer. Then you can look at the pictures of them before they died, and you can study, perceive the cancer energy. You can study it, you can see it, perceive it, what's in them. And interestingly enough, if you go back, if like they die in their 60s and you go back to when they was in their 20s, that energy is still there. They haven't suddenly acquired what killed them. They've had it all their life, and it's built up all their life. That energy, it might be in a weaker state or a lesser state, but it's still there. It's there. And if you've got baby pictures of them, you can see they're born with it. You know? These things can be inherited. These energies, nasty, harmful energies, they're there all their lives. And this is true of just about any long-term chronic condition. People suddenly show the symptoms of it if they suddenly get arthritis, or they suddenly get, their bodies start to break down and they get really unpleasant things, motor neuron disease or Parkinson's or something. Like, I'm just thinking now about Michael J. Fox, the actor, who recently said, or fairly recently said, about his Parkinson's disease. Now, there is an opportunity, I hope he won't mind if ever he sees this, but there is an opportunity to study the energy of it all, to get an insight, a perception into the energy, because he's got it now, and when I look at him 20, 25 years ago, I can see it then. And I saw it then before it was announced what it was, before he announced what he had. But when I saw it then, 25 years ago, I didn't know what it was. This is the world of energy. You can look at something and you've no idea what it is. Perception is one thing, but understanding what you're looking at, that's something completely different. That takes experience. That takes quite a long time. When you acquire, if you acquire it, I mean, these are natural things. What I'm talking about here isn't some great spiritual thing, great mental achievement. You have to be highly gifted or anything. This is for us, ordinary people like you and me. This is something we can do. With the healing methods, we can help people. With the perceptions of the illnesses, we can help people. We can help ourselves. We can develop ourselves and find out about ourselves and do things that we wouldn't have suspected we could do. So there is all this to healing. It's very nice, a very nice way to develop. Now, when the mind is in a perceptive mode, it will communicate and connect with energies. That seems to be its function. It will connect with energies. And those energies could be from within itself. Higher energy. Higher is not the right word, but it could be the mind, when it's in perceptive mode, starts to communicate with itself. So that's when you get the creativity side. Yeah? Creation or creativity comes when the mind is in this perceptive state, and then it can perceive its own, it can perceive what it's trying to tell itself. It's a strange way of putting it, but that's what happens. The perceptive mind, the mind is perceptive all the time. It's not about making the mind perceptive. The perception is there all the time. It's making us aware of the perception, aware of the mind being perceptive and joining with it. And the mind being in a perceptive frame all the time, it's its function, is constantly acquiring information about everything, the world. As we travel round, the mind is taking in all this information, and out of that information, out of the story of the world, comes the creation. It creates its reply. The world talks to it, and it talks back. The world gives it its problem, and the mind, through creation, gives it its solution. I think the brain understands this because the brain tries to mimic this process. It tries to be creative. It tries to be inventive. Well, invention is the brain's version of creativity. But the difference is that the invention nearly always has problems. It's not an inclusive, total solution. There are problems, there are side effects. Technology has its side effects, which isn't to say we scrap it all. The whole point of this is to try and develop some balance. Get some balance. Okay, so that's it on this one. If you've been listening, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I'm doing these videos. I'm getting ready to work and develop Healing with Energy Step 4, which is very interesting. Yeah, very interesting. And I want to, I'm busy on this to make sure that all this is right and correct before I move on to other stuff. So I'm not sure if I'm going to do another one on this, on developing perception. I'll probably come back to it because it's one of the three strands I'm developing at the moment: healing methods, understanding illnesses, and developing perception. So there's a lot there. There's a lot there for people to find. As I just said, this isn't religion or spiritual. It doesn't take you to the spiritual. It brings you to the point where you're ready to go forwards according to your own ways of doing things. All this is, or everything I do, is putting the body right. I'm a physical healer. I'm not for minds or hearts or spirits or anything else. I heal the body, or I try to. Once the body's healed, then everything unifies and there's a transformation. Because it's only illness and disease and all the results of the world that we've created, the pollution and the environment, the toxic nature and all that. It's only the harm that all this has done to us that holds us back. When all that's gone out of the body, it's a natural process to, first of all, harmonise and then to transform. It will naturally move forwards. But it's only to get you to the point where you are ready to go forwards. This is step one. Getting the person to the point where they can go forwards. And they might want the spiritual or the higher or the religious or whatever it is. That isn't me. That isn't me, and that's not, as I see it, my job. My job is the body. Get the body right. And then you can go forwards. Okay. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you on the next one. Or you'll see me. Thank you. Cheerio.